COP28 is being held in Dubai, the UAE's most populous city. The UAE is one of the world's top 10 oil-producing nations. Hope and pessimism as COP gets underway. The annual COP summits are the focal point of international climate diplomacy, yet many feel they are being fundamentally undermined. COP28, currently underway in Dubai, has been particularly controversial even before it got started.
Progress despite controversies? The decisions made in the run-up to COP28 have led to plenty of pessimism from those urging action on climate change. The choice of the United Arab Emirates, one of the world's top 10 producers of oil and gas, sparked concern, and the appointment of Sultan Al Jaber, the head of the UAE's biggest oil and gas company, to lead the COP caused even more outrage. These choices of a nation and president with clear economic interests in defending fossil fuels has led many to question the validity of COP, especially when more fossil fuel lobbyists than ever are in attendance.
But despite these controversies, there is hope that significant progress could be made in some important negotiations.
I pray with all my heart that COP28 will be another critical turning point towards genuine transformational action at a time when already, as scientists have been warning for so long, we are seeing alarming tipping points being reached.
COP28 goals. Every COP tends to focus on some specific agenda items, and COP28 is no different. The COP presidency has organized the conference to focus on the following: a global stocktake, the mitigation work program, the global goal on adaptation, climate finance, including financial arrangements for loss and damage. These are some essential and often quite specific agenda items for accelerating the world's work on climate change mitigation and adaptation.
Records are now being broken so often that we are perhaps becoming immune to what they are really telling us. When we see the news that this last Northern Hemisphere summer, for instance, was the warmest global average temperature on record, we need to pause to process what this actually means.
A global stocktake. COP28 will be the first time that each of the 196 nations that signed the Paris Agreement back at COP21 in 2016 will report how they are faring against their national climate commitments. At COP28, a draft text on this matter highlights a narrowing window of opportunity to take the action needed, saying nations are not collectively on track to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. However, there is hope that this stocktake will provide the visibility and leverage needed to encourage nations to accelerate their actions and make stronger commitments from 2025 onwards.
We are taking the natural world outside balanced norms and limits and into dangerous, uncharted territory. We are carrying out a vast, frightening experiment of changing every ecological condition all at once, at a pace that far outstrips nature's ability to cope.
The stocktake will highlight the need for systemic transformations throughout society to build and maintain a trajectory of climate mitigation alongside equity and justice for all. Mitigation Work Program. The Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation Ambition and Implementation Work Program aims to be an opportunity for nations to collectively find ways to upscale mitigation efforts. The MWP's annual report, published in November, summarizes progress in lead-up events prior to COP28. One significant point of progress is the massive 70% surge in renewable energy investment last year. But now that needs to be matched with rapid large-scale deployment, with a special focus on supplying the Global South, which is still suffering from lack of investment in such new infrastructure.
The dangers are no longer distant risks. I have seen across the Commonwealth and beyond countless communities which are unable to withstand repeated shocks, whose lives and livelihoods are laid waste by climate change. Surely, real action is required to stem the growing toll of its most vulnerable victims.
Carbon capture and utilization and carbon capture and storage solutions, which are ramping up in several nations, were also discussed. While the technology is promising, there are barriers to large-scale deployment, and some feel they may shift the focus away from renewable energy, delaying progress on the energy transition. Other discussions covered transport systems, and the global need to shift towards public transport powered by alternative fuels or electricity.
As we work towards a zero-carbon future, we must work equally towards being nature positive. With what we are witnessing, our choice now is a starker and darker one. How dangerous are we actually prepared to make our world? Dealing with this is a job for us all. Change will come by working together and making it easier to embrace decisions that will sustain our world, rather than carry on as though there are no limits or as though our actions have no consequences.
Adaptation, climate finance, and loss and damage. Adaptation efforts focus on making society and communities more able to tolerate the effects of climate change that are already locked in. Who pays for adaptation measures is a thorny question. It's generally agreed that developed nations, those who are most responsible for causing climate change, should contribute the most. But previous targets to help finance developing nations with their efforts have been missed. Making a more watertight funding model will be a core focus of this COP. Yet in terms of payments for loss and damage, that is, paying vulnerable nations for now unavoidable climate-instigated destruction, the COP has already made surprising progress. Countries agreed to a new fund to help vulnerable nations weather climate risks, but many are concerned about the role of the World Bank as interim manager of this fund. The World Bank's board principally comprises people from wealthy countries, which could lead to developed nations being favored when it comes to supplying funds. Much of the funding will also be supplied as loans rather than grants, which could only increase developing countries' national debts.
Repeated cyclones batter vulnerable island nations like Vanuatu and Dominica. India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan have been experiencing unprecedented floods, and East Africa is suffering a decades-long drought. This past summer, in common with Spain, Greece, the United States, and many other countries, Canada experienced its most severe wildfire season on record, with 18.5 million hectares of land burned, causing terrible loss of life and property, and of course, releasing enormous amounts of greenhouse gases that contribute to dangerous feedback loops to which climate scientists have been alerting us for decades.
The early days of COP28 itself have given cause for hope. Progress has already been made on agenda items such as the Loss and Damage Fund, and it's likely that more is to come. While progress might be checked by the strong presence and influence of fossil fuel interests, the global drive for change is stronger than ever, both in the debating chambers and in communities themselves.
As I've tried to say on many occasions, unless we rapidly repair and restore nature's unique economy based on harmony and balance, which is our ultimate sustainer, our own economy and survivability will be imperiled. Imagine a sustainable future for people everywhere, a future that is in harmony with nature, not set against her. Ladies and gentlemen, in your hands is an unmissable opportunity to keep our common hope alive. I can only urge you to meet it with ambition, imagination, and a true sense of the emergency we face, and together with a commitment to the practical action upon which our shared future depends.